Oregon. John is running his campaign on a platform of collaboration to heal divisions that currently exist in the DPO that will serve to include everyone and propel the DPO forward for electoral victories statewide and locally in all corners of the state of Oregon, and also propel the DPO forward with progress in writing legislation that will bring democracy together in the state of Oregon and build our state up and cause us to have success in Oregon. So without further ado, I will give you John Harris Knight.
Hello, everybody. Thanks, Gary. And thank you, Lydia, for the introduction. I'm glad to be here with all of you. And, obviously I'm running for chair of the Democratic Party of Oregon on a platform of an equity-centered collaborative approach to the work that we do, with an idea toward building connections, building community, fostering relationships within the party, as well as with the communities that we're trying to serve. I know that we've had a frustrating couple of years, as well as a successful last couple of years in a lot of ways. And so what I really want to do is hear from you all a little bit about what your experiences have been, what your concerns and your goals are for the state party, for your county parties, and how we work together to accomplish goals with one shared vision, and, through our shared values to try to get the job done for the communities where we live, as well as the communities we care about all over the state. But first of all, we've got a brief video we want to show you. Some of you may have seen it already, but it'll just kind of get things started a little bit.
My name is John Harris Knight. I'm running to be your chair of the Democratic Party of Oregon. When you first decided to dedicate your time and energy in the Democratic Party, what was the reason? Did you see a wrong that needed to be put right? Was it something that happened to you? Or did you watch the struggles of your loved ones and the people you care about? Or maybe it was seeing an injustice happen to someone you don't even know. Because we care, we had to move, get active, create change. In politics, though, we can lose sight of what matters most, the people and processes that drive real change. Every single one of us, our perspectives, our contributions, our lived experiences, our political goals are valuable, but we don't all feel valued. Despite our successes, our party's future is at risk. We may be successful in the Metro and the Willamette Valley, but there's a Republican Party ready and willing to challenge us all over Oregon. Those of us in red and swing districts already know this, and that's why they need our help and our resources. That's why I'm running to be your chair of the Democratic Party of Oregon. We need a systemic change, one that will empower us all to create together, nurture community, and actively promote equitable, participatory inclusion so that we all feel and are valued. We can come together as an SEC community to implement an equity-centered, collaborative approach to advance the legislative and electoral victories that we need to uplift and support every Oregonian. Over the coming weeks, I will continue calling delegates and Democrats across the state to learn more about your local needs and what you envision for the party's future. We will share more videos like this one to elaborate on how we can build this infrastructure, to share resources and foster relationships. Until then, I wish you kindness, safety, and good health wherever you may go. My name is John Harris Knight, the collaborative candidate for chair of the Democratic Party of Oregon.
All right, so hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea about the kind of approach that I'm trying to bring to the party as chair. One of the key things about about the chair position is that it's really a facilitator role. It's a role to help facilitate the work of the party and to help you all make decisions as the SEC and in your caucuses and county parties. And that idea of facilitation, the meaning of the word being to make it easier. And so one of the things I want to do is really understand what would make things easier for you, as well as what's your vision and when you hear the concept of a collaborative model, what does that sound like to you? What would that feel like to you? And what would it look like? And how would you think that we would be able to implement a more collaborative approach, at every stage of the work we do as a party? And so feel free to raise your hands. Jenny, if you want to just make a comment, if you're having a hard time raising your hand, I think that'll be okay too. I'm seeing the chat here too.
Well, you asked a question, why we got involved. And
Yeah.
I live in Lynn County, and I kept getting ballots with no Democrats on them. And when I finally found the Democrats, who were very hard to find in my county in 2017 after the Trump debacle, there were a lot of us waving those empty PCP ballots, and I think we all knew we were volunteering. But it's just hard to run candidates when people like the DCCC and the DSCC put their fingers on the scale against primary challengers. It just really looks unfair and bad, and it turns people off, especially the kinds of people that are going to be attracted to democratic principles. And that's why I sponsored 2019-11 and finally got it passed. But it took me a long time because leadership wasn't very enthusiastic about it.
Yeah, I hear you, Jenny. I think that's a great point. I think there are a lot of us who get inspired by the options that we have as a Democratic Party, and one of the frustrations can be living in a community. I grew up in Tennessee. I almost never had someone I could vote for. Occasionally we'd get a Democratic governor, but that was before I was even of voting age. That was back in like the 80s or so. And honestly, it can be frustrating. I used to live in Corvallis, so Benton County, and Benton County is almost entirely Democratic candidates, and so obviously visiting in Albany and obviously Lynn County goes all the way into the middle of the mountains, and knowing that as a county there are a lot of diverse perspectives and voices, I understand it can be challenging to find people who are willing to step up to run as Democrats, especially if they feel like their communities might respond poorly to them being Democrats. Talking with counties, in central eastern Oregon and other parts of the state, where people have actually received threats, not for being candidates, but just for being an officer in their county party.
First year I was here in 2020, I witnessed my neighbor being physically attacked for having a DeFazio sign on his corner. It is here in Lebanon. We've had our local hot dog shop. They knew she supported Democrats.
Wow.
They smeared the doors with dog feces. It's not just in the eastern counties.
Yeah, absolutely. It's rural. It means different things in different parts of the state, but it also, that kind of violent conservative narrative seems to be common, no matter where you are. And you're talking about why you got involved, the fact that you wanted to see more candidates and more support, and in terms of strong primaries and things like that. I think it's important to understand that it's good as a party to have options. I wouldn't be running as a challenger to an incumbent if I didn't think that was something beneficial to the party to consider our options and alternatives and try to find the best possible way to work together to accomplish our shared goals. Now, I was even asked online recently on Facebook whether or not, as chair, I was going to support a strong, primary against Kurt Schrader, and if I wasn't, they weren't going to support me. And I do want to make the point, and I've put it in writing. It's on the website. It's in the list of proposals in the section of what I will do throughout the 2 years as you know, throughout the term as chair, is I will never act to influence any vote on a resolution, bylaws change, rules change, a vote inside the party, whether it's at the county party level, within the SCC, or at the primary, because I think that we need to make sure that people know that they have a right to have their voices heard, to participate fully in the political process. And when we talk about diversity and equity and inclusion, I think it really factors in the idea that if people feel like their voices aren't going to be heard, whether it's inside the party or running for a primary, if they feel like, you know, the deck is stacked against them, why would they come and why would they stay? And I think that, you know, that's true in terms of diversity, in terms of identity, and in terms of ability, or neurodiversity, or region, or political perspective, all the different ways that we can imagine diversity within this party that we constantly talk about as a big tent. You know, that big tent needs to be warm, not cold. It needs to be inviting and welcoming. And I think that there are a lot of us who are frustrated when we feel like it's not welcoming, but we need a way to bring that, you know, to practice.
We need
That kind of welcoming environment.
practice. We need a farm team. We need people coming up through the ranks. I actually,
Absolutely.
while I support primary challengers, I endorse DeFazio because I like him.
Right.
So, you know, it's not
You get to choose.
against the incumbent. It's just we need to, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, it's the opportunity to share ideas. You know, one of the stated purposes, at least in the Multnomah County Democrats, is, you know, the sharing of ideas. And I think that one of the things that we try to do, you know, people try to share their ideas within the state party and the SEC, but sometimes our formatting and the, you know, the way that we conduct meetings isn't always conducive to that. And so I think while we need that, you know, deliberative process, the parliamentary procedures that we can finalize decisions and you know, and get past any kind of an impasse we may have over a certain, you know, vote or resolution or rules change or anything. Earlier in the earlier stages of that work, we can work through those questions about how we want to draft something up and what we want to produce and how we want it to look. That can involve more input, more collaboration, more you know, more of a work session kind of approach, instead of just doing it through these tedious and frustrating business meetings. So that when we are done having a more, you know, small group kind of collaborative work to create something, we make sure that there's an opportunity for people to see it, provide their input and feedback, consider that input, not just consider it so we can discard it and say, oh, we did our part, we did our due diligence, but to actually say, you know, to prioritize saying, how can we incorporate this person's concerns, this person's, you know, ideas or ideals even into what we're trying to do, so that we have multiple lenses put on it. You know, so how often do things come to the SEC and people wonder, did we talk to Disability Caucus about the accessibility of this rules change? Have we talked to the Black Caucus, the Native American Caucus, the AAPI Caucus, Latino Caucus, you know, everybody, about whether or not, you know, how we can make this stronger and reflect their perspective, and to really get more input. And if we do that, I think we're going to show people that not only do we value their perspective and their input, but that we value them. And if we feel like we're valued, we're going to work better together. We're going to collaborate more, and we're going to get more done. And when we get to those business meetings, things are going to be a lot smoother, because we're already going to have buy-in. We're going to, you know, people are going to be more familiar with what they're voting on. And I'm really encouraged by the idea that, you know, there's so much energy in the party from all the delegates I've talked to about this idea that we need to get past the frustrations and the struggles. And people are asking, how do we do that? How do we do that? And so that's why I've collected proposals from all over the state to try to address that and accomplish that, not only in the first actions as chair, but throughout the entire term. So, Jenny, do you feel like I've answered your question thoroughly, or do you have anything any follow-up question that you want to ask?
I'm good with it.
All right, good. If you think of something else, obviously, I want to make sure people have a chance to circle back and get to ask other questions. So anybody else, what do you think of when you hear the idea of a collaborative model?
Well,
do you-
John, you just brought up something that you and I had talked about offline, which is that as Democrats, we have got to get a lot better at laying the groundwork. Resolutions don't pass because we show up at SEC and everybody suddenly goes, oh, excellent idea, let's pass that. People have to have time to talk about it. You know, and resolutions don't get made into legislation unless we lay the groundwork for that as well. So what, 2 years ago, we passed the gun owners caucus work on permit to purchase. That just now made it to the Senate floor. And it took a lot of work to get it there. But so many of our resolutions seem to languish. So how can we, I should preface this, John, because people don't know that the first time that you and I worked together was on that very contentious platform committee for the economic thing. And this is, you know, this was my first experience of you and me seeing you actually calm people down and get back to the groundwork. And that's, you know, that groundwork is everything. I mean, you would never show up on election day and think you're going to win an election. So we have to start laying that plan. How do you want to get more people on board with actually planning ahead instead of just fighting this exact whatever fire is in front of us right now?
That's a great point. I mean, that last thing you just said is that, you know, and I've come across this before in writing it probably better than I'm going to word it now, but the idea that we often get distracted by the next political or next crisis, right? At political parties, we often get distracted by crises. And part of that's because we sometimes use that, you know, the Democratic Party sometimes uses that, and the Republicans do, as a fundraising tool. Oh, there's this other crisis, give us money, kind of a thing, right? But I think within the party, we have the opportunity to be more deliberative. I think that there's, you know, there's this real desire to have more impact with the work that we do. You know, I've heard from people who've talked about how do we whenever we create something, whether it's at the platform committee, or, you know, or a resolution or anything like that, how do we shepherd that through a process where our legislators, our local officials are doing the work there? I think that when we do that, if we have a more formalized process there, people are going to be excited because they're going to say, oh, this is where I can put my energy. This is what I care about. You know, so many of us, we got involved because for very specific reasons and to utilize our skill sets or to improve our skills. Some people care about legislation. Some people care about connecting with the community. Some people care about winning elections. You know, that's where their focus goes, you know? And I think that within the party, we've got people who have all those kinds of, you know, where their priorities are in terms of the actions that they take. But we need to create a better program so that we can do that planning ahead, preparation work. One of the proposals I have, you know, the concern about serving and supporting our rural county parties and communities and really challenging the Republican and the timber unity, you know, onslaught, you know, from those school district, school board positions all on up, is to convene or to propose a special committee that's dedicated toward making recommendations specifically so that the SEC and the DPO can address the various concerns from rural communities and our county CCs so that we can actually have concrete plans and proposals that we can work through and try to develop into you know, a systematic approach to serve those needs. That again, it's not something you can turn around and do in the final weeks before an election. You know, I've worked as the chair of the Neighborhood Leader Program in Multnomah County. I was the first chair of our NLP program after many years of the county kind of resisting those recommendations from the state party to adopt that program. So I definitely value the idea that, you know, we need to do concerted work to connect with people. But the way I presented it in the county was we shouldn't just talk to voters and people in our state in the weeks before an election. It should be all year round. So the way I designed it out was like quarterly or more frequently if people wanted to keep, you know, connecting. But for the neighborhood leaders to connect with those neighbors at least 4 times a year, really, seasonally, to try to keep that relationship going, because we need to have systems that help us get through that process of planning and preparation. Right now, we do not have a strategic plan for the party. My imagining is that we need a plan for maybe, with considering the next 2, 4, and 8 years, something that we can all come together and work together on. And I like to say that to make it equity centered. So we're talking about, ensuring that our plan accounts for diverse communities in terms of identity, in terms of region, in terms of how at risk they are based on the representatives they have in local and state government. Talking with people on our delegation from Warm Springs Reservation, their concern is water. I've talked to a delegate from Curry County, said 3 of the towns in Curry County on the coast, their concern is water. We know this. Central and Eastern Oregon, water is obviously a big deal, but you'd think on the coast, with all those streams running out of the Coast Range, you'd have a little bit better water infrastructure. But as a party, we think about things like transportation infrastructure, water, electrical grid, that kind of thing. We're a party that likes infrastructure investments. Well, we need to do the same thing within the party. We need to create a collaborative model that people feel like they can use to do work together in advance, not at the last minute. We need a strategic plan, an piece of infrastructure, so that we can, work together on this document for maybe every 2 years we review it and update it. But the idea is that if we have that plan, we can coordinate our efforts and focus our time. So often, I think we've all encountered this, where somebody's got a great idea and they go, what we need to do is, they point somewhere and they go, this, and somebody else says, no, we have to do this. And it's like, if we want to get non-affiliated voters, it's this thing. It's like, no, what we need to do is do more of whatever, right? And there are a bunch of ideas, and a lot of them can be really great. We obviously can't do all of them at once all the time, but what I'm proposing also is to have some kind of a repository where people can submit ideas, so that we can then look at them as delegates and as caucuses and as county parties, and say, what is it that we want to do that's out of this list? How much enthusiasm do we have for things? And right now, it's a matter of calling the people getting on a Facebook page, trying to talk about what you care about. But a lot of times, I think it feels like we're talking into the wind, and we're trying to get people on board with our idea, and we don't have a concerted plan to see where that great idea fits in really neatly here. And as a result, I think that there's a lot of opportunity, but I think we also have, a lot of frustration, because we all have great ideas and we got here to try to put them into action. Anyway, who else has a good question? Or Eileen, do you have anything to follow up about?
Oh, I would just say, never underestimate the encouraging each other. John, I always appreciate it when, I remember it was at Yamhill when we finally finished the Q1 meeting, and I looked back and you gave me jazz hands. And, that sounds like such a small thing, but it really meant a lot to me. It was a difficult experience to go through. And, sometimes we just have to remember to be kind to each other.
Yeah. All right, Gary, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I really love the word collaboration in your platform, John. And I think if there's anything that resonates with me, is how that signals the idea that we talk among ourselves more and better. I think my observation in the last couple of years is that we've gotten so wrapped up in hierarchical processes that we've kind of shot ourselves in the foot a little bit, and that we've discouraged ourselves from, if you want to call it, giving all the parties a seat at the table. I'm a House District leader in North Portland, And we have really cool discussions among my steering committee members about how we want to do outreach to reach the people, all of our registered Dems. We have a huge number of registered Dems in my House district, but they aren't participating. They don't know what their opportunities are. They don't see themselves identifying as part of the Democratic Party process. They just feel like they're probably asked to vote every November or in May. And what I has been proposing to them is, how do we create forums for them to feel like they are getting a seat at the table, that they are talking about the stuff that's important to them? And I think the same thing is true within all of the hierarchy, if you want to call it, of DPO. We've got SEC delegates across a huge state. We've got alternates who are extraordinarily informed and talented. We've got standing committee delegates and alternates. We have wonderful caucuses across a variety of topics and geographies that never get a chance to really talk among ourselves, maybe informally, like this kind of a town hall opportunity, so that instead of concentrating all on how do we get stuff jammed through a 2-hour or 4-hour meeting once a quarter, we get to talk about all the topics that some of those things are really all about, so that we all get input into it and that we feel like we're part of the deliberation in it, even if we're not part of the official committees. Now, I guess I'd like to see us build more opportunities like that on a regular basis as possible.
Yeah, those are great suggestions, Gary. And I know that you are among many of the different delegates and PCPs in the metro area who have talked about wanting to use your skills, energy, time to help connect with and support other counties, especially counties that have much fewer Democrats than the 3 counties in the metro. So the challenge with that has been that you all are talking about calling delegates whose numbers you don't necessarily have, and trying to build those relationships. And I hope, as chair, to help facilitate and bring upon us a systematic way to connect counties with each other, so they can mutually support each other. But like you're saying about this kind of a town hall thing, I'm imagining, and I don't want to commit to exact timing or anything like that, but I'm imagining something like quarterly, like in between each quarterly meeting, having a town hall or some kind of event like this with maybe breakout groups and even more like designed activities so that people can share ideas. One of my proposals on the website is a sister counties kind of program, something along those lines, where counties can team up with each other and build those kinds of relationships with each other, so that we can come up with these great ideas and pull ideas together in a constructive way. So thank you, Gary. I appreciate that. All right. Anybody else who has a question to or comment on what collaboration might look like? If you have any like structural ideas, like how we'd really do it, because I've got some ideas, but I don't want to just talk at you. I want to hear what you all think. Oh, I see Ruth. Did Ruth? Oh, there you are.
So, actually, use my headset. So I like your idea of, the equity-based collaboration. And as chair of the Tribal Sovereignty Legislative Action Study Group, one thing that we're looking at in our legislative action study group is, where is all the overlap with all of the other study groups? And there's a study Gary, 13, right? 13 study groups, one for each article. So there are 13 study groups. So we're looking at where is all the overlap so that we could collaborate and coordinate with those other study groups. So my question is about, you know, and I know that you have a response to this because you're looking at the how we can put this into action. So just from my little, perspective, I think of the complexities and the complexities of that and the coordination and how we can be more effective and efficient when we are collaborating. So I'd just like to hear you comment on anything that I've said.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, in Multnomah County, not every county obviously has a platform for their own county party, and therefore they may not have a platform committee. But in Multnomah County, Faith Ruffing has been the platform chair for a long time and has done a good job of facilitating these ideas of these study groups around the various aspects of that platform. We don't obviously have that current structure within the DPO platform. Is it something we possibly could do? I would love to hear that proposal and that kind of process. Given the current structures that we have, though, I do have a proposal with regard to the work that we do in standing committees. Platform and resolutions is just one example of that, where whenever we do create that item in the drafting phase, that we actually create a system for input from not only every member of that committee, because that usually is not how it works, right? But to really facilitate that collaboration in committee, to make sure it's available to all the SCC members, all delegates and alternates with all those skills they bring, so they can provide feedback and input in a constructive way over a period of time, a couple weeks or whatever makes sense, but provide that input, but also to make sure that gets shared out with every single caucus, as well as potentially to every single county party, so they can put their particular lens on it and say, really try to give that input so that what we create is as considerate of those perspectives as possible. When it comes to all the kinds of work we can do, I think a lot of it comes down to whether or not we take a proposal and are willing to change the way we do things. Often it's like, well, that's just not what we do, right? We've heard this kind of thing. It's like, well, this is how we do it. But could we have a committee that works on, or like subcommittees of the Platform Resolutions Committee? Potentially. Could we have a fundraising committee for the party? A lot of nonprofit boards have a fundraising committee to help bring in fundraising, funds for their organization. All kinds of potential options there, but I feel like there's a piece, Ruth, of what you're asking that I haven't quite touched on yet. Can you remind me?
Yeah, I was giving the study group structure just as
right.
an example of what I'm participating in, and we're also responding to the gentle nudgings from Representative Sanchez for us to be building relationships with tribal nations and almost all of them are in rural areas. So she would like to see us building those relationships across the state. So my question was more about your musings about how your vision, your envisioning and musings about some of the practical ways that the collaboration can take place, and using your example of water, the concerns about water, because another concern related to water is the obstruction of the dams on the Columbia for salmon runs, for example. So
Yeah.
I would just like anything that you would like to say regarding
Sure.
your, maybe an example you have of the kind of collaboration that you're envisioning, in
Right.
addition to what you've already said.
That's great. Talking with some of the delegates from Yamhill County, for example, they're particularly concerned about our ability to connect with not only the Latino community, but farm workers in the area, as well as immigrant communities, residents and non-citizens as well, to really better understand the circumstances that they're living in. And when communities, obviously this is true with tribal nations as well as many other communities, they may not have a great relationship with political parties in general, which means that we have to do the work to connect with them where they are. And to do that, sometimes it means building a relationship with someone who's seen as a leader in the community, but it also can be through community service work, finding ways for us as a party to support connecting with the community through service activities. I know that I attended one of your tribal sovereignty legislative action study group sessions where Representative Tana Sanchez showed up and helped us with a process that you set up for us so that we could be more effective in a very short amount of time through a practical kind of exercise, so they could write letters to our legislators about a particular bill to implement an Indigenous Peoples Day. That kind of work in terms of facilitating actions from the members of the SEC. We've got so many people, so much energy to do things. I think engaging us in more practical activities, whether it's community service work, whether it's the legislative work, also the idea of we have delegates that come from some of these communities, and we need to really find a way to uplift them, not only within the party and listen to their voices, but to say, can you show us what your circumstance, what you're dealing with? Can you explain it to us? And as a chair, one of the things I want to do, and I would love to take more people with me, whether it's other officers and other delegates, but to go to every county that I can, if not all the counties. I mean, obviously I'm thinking about the timing and how long it'll take to get to 36 counties, but I think it's practical and it's doable to go to every county and say, don't just show me your county office or the house where you are running the county party out of. Show me the communities that we need to support the most and to connect with the most. Help me connect with people. Help us as a party, not just me. Help us as a party connect with the people who are in those communities. Do we connect with tribal leaders? Do we work with migrant farm worker organizers? Do we connect with the organizations that we're kind of allied with anyway, at least in terms of values, and build relationships with the people who are trying to organize around those various advocacy issues so that we can build connections with those communities that way. Obviously it runs the range in terms of possibilities, but again, we have to be coordinated and it has to be facilitated and supported, and not just rely on whether or not somebody has the energy, the time, and the enthusiasm for it. Ruth, I see your hands up again. Do you have something else you want to add?
I was debating about whether I would ask this. I think about the balance between how to, I can see that you will bring this into, take your vision and bring it into, actual practice. What would you do as a leader to not get bogged down with minutia?
That's a great question. And I do want to recognize that I do see questions in the chat. I do want to get to them. I'm not missing those. But in terms of minutia and not getting bogged down, I think that's important. Part of that is making sure that, I'm not the only person facilitating things. We need to really give the opportunity for other people, especially people with various, facilitation skills and the ability to run meetings. And we've got a lot of those folks. We've got chairs of caucuses and standing committees and people who are chairs of their county parties who have done this kind of work, to bring them in to help them, facilitate in smaller groups. It's a lot easier to get bogged down in minutia when you're in a large group and trying to sort out all the different perspectives, but to really try to break down the work that we're trying to do into more bite-sized chunks so that we can, work on pieces, and then put all those pieces together. Obviously, when we talk about business meetings, we can get bogged down in minutia, and all the collaboration in the world isn't going to prevent every single instance where somebody has something what they want to add or change. But I think when it comes to us getting focused on the finer details and maybe even getting distracted by it, I think that if we set that tone, I mean, especially whether it's me as chair or someone else as a chair of their committee or caucus or special committee or anything like that, that they really focus on knowing what the goals are, knowing what the intended purpose is, and making sure they keep the conversation on track. And I think that's, that can be challenging, but if we're going to do it, I think we need to make sure that people are trained. We need to set people up for success, making sure that every caucus, chair and vice chair and every standing committee chair, and make sure all the officers have the opportunity to get training in whether it's Robert's rules and parliamentary procedure, whether it's how to effectively navigate groups of different sizes. I certainly have, understand that I'm always growing in those regards as well. And I think that it'd be great for us to put together ideas like that. But again, it's going to take us all working together to, and as chair, I hope to set the tone that, the goal, we have shared goals and that we really need to be driving towards them. But give me just a second. I want to address some of the questions in the chat. I want to make sure that I touch on those. I know that Joseph asked a question. Says, what experience do you have, if any, in organizing around racial justice, and how would you work to collaborate around these issues? And I'd said earlier, I think before you got on, Joseph, I'm not a diversity, equity, and inclusion professional. I care about it. I am intentional about trying to be more equitable and inclusive in the way that I engage with people and in the organizations. But one thing I do know is that if you want to have solid work around race, justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion, you got to get professionals and you got to pay them. You can't ask people to do that kind of work for free. And I understand we have a budget and we have, funds that are naturally limited based on, the fact that we don't have infinite funds. But what I think we should do, and I've heard, and this is something that I've heard from other people. So this is not a John Knight idea. This is an idea I've heard all over the place, is that if we want to really practice equity and justice in the party, as well as do the work to have a more equitable and just impact on the communities that we're trying to serve in Oregon, we need to bring in professionals to guide us through that process of creating that equity-centered collaborative model, to help us create that equity-centered strategic plan, and to ensure that the practices that we have within the party are able to center equity and practice justice. Because if we can practice it internally within the party, we will know more about how to get that kind of equity and justice applied to the work we're trying to do, whether it's legislative victories, electoral victories, and getting people elected, all the work that we're talking about doing. There's a great website. I've started posting things about it on the Just Us Delegates page. Specifically, it's from Standing Up for Racial Justice. And there's one of their pages on their website is about white supremacy characteristics within organizations. And you could even take the word white off of it. But if you read the whole list, I would say it's even just more simply supremacy characteristics, the idea of people vying for supremacy within an organization. And the interest is not in uplifting everybody and connecting with each other and uplifting voices that maybe and experiences that maybe don't often get heard, but the idea that we can overcome that, and it gives antidotes for each of these challenging problems. The idea of treating people as a mistake because they made a mistake, the kind of patriarchal kind of kinds of challenges we run into. Maybe in a little bit I can pull it up and share the screen or something, but it's really a great website, Standing Up for Racial Justice. And if you find the characteristics of a white supremacy culture, and I think the proposals I'm trying to bring forward are the kinds of proposals that will help us practice those antidotes. Again, not being a diversity, equity, inclusion professional, we still will need the people who have that experience both who are already inside the party and have dedicated their lives to racial justice, but also, those professionals that I think we should try to identify and bring in to help facilitate us to implement that even further into what we do. So that's a great question, Joseph. If there's anything else you want to ask around that, please feel free to. Let me touch on what Jenny said about 1 hour meetings at the the Platform and Resolution Committee. I think that's great. And I think when it comes to input, we obviously want to have that kind of be offline, like not during the middle of a meeting, trying to bring all of that in by inviting however many people to a meeting. I think the idea is to facilitate that through a electronic mechanism of some sort where people can submit their suggestions, maybe through an online form or something like that. But the idea would be that then, whatever work group is inside of that committee is working on that particular draft, their task would be to try to incorporate that and to turn around and say, can you clarify what you're looking for here? Can you talk with us a little bit about how to incorporate your idea a little bit better? And the purpose behind that, I think, is to actually make their job easier. So they don't have to try to guess what's going to work for every community and every perspective. It's to really say, I don't know everything, and to be okay with that. And to say, but I hear you say you know something or understand something, and let's incorporate that. Let's see. Yeah. I see your comment also about having an Oregon Democratic site, Jenny. I think that's really interesting. The idea of us, almost having like an electron or a virtual slate card for everybody to kind of share their candidacy a little bit. That could be really interesting, especially for rural county parties that you don't always have the infrastructure and the support to have a campaign website for every candidate, but to find a way to facilitate that. I think that would be really interesting. Oh, Jenny, I think you're muted. Are you trying to chime in?
People don't hear about these very rural candidates. I only heard about Kat Stone like the day before the election. She was the only Democrat running in her county, and it would be great to know about these people way in advance. So Multnomah has, it feels to me like so much money. They should send some of it elsewhere, or they're going to end up being the only Democrats in the state. We lost so many people on the coast, and
that's a great question. Scary. That's a great suggestion. A lot of people have, I've talked to county party chairs who, when we had a quarterly meeting in their county, they were really frustrated because those fundraisers we had on Saturday nights, for a lot of places, it's the idea is that it's split 50-50 between the state party and the county party. I mean, that makes sense if it's Multnomah County or Clackamas or maybe even Marion County or Lane County. But when it comes to those rural counties, how often are they going to get all of us to show up in their county? Not very often. And we don't all have money bags that we're carrying around, but we do donate quite a bit at those events. And if it were clear to a lot of us that the donations we were giving, buying those dinners, doing additional donations there, if we thought that if we went to Josephine County, or if we went to Klamath County or Union County, Umatilla, when we went out to Pendleton, if we knew that all of the funds we raised went to supporting that local county's efforts, I think we'd even get more money. I think we'll get more money when we're more successful, in terms of collaborating, connecting with more communities. The more people we connect with, the more people who feel like we're representing them, the more people are going to be excited. Not only from those communities, are we going to get more donors and that kind of thing, but people who care about those communities, who say, what are we doing for immigrants? What are we doing for tribal nations? What are we doing for the Asian American and Pacific Islander communities that are being targeted? I live on 82nd, off of 82nd Avenue in Southeast Portland, up and down 82nd. That is, there are, Asian-based businesses all up and down there, and we've seen it. We've seen the kind of damage that's been done. And so, if we do the work to connect with those communities, to say, hey, we care about you. When during the fires, if as a party we are reaching out to the communities that are affected by the fires, our PCPs who are affected by the fires, if we're really connecting with those communities that are affected by the different things that are going on, then, I don't want to turn it into this idea that, oh, if we do all this work, we'll get money. It's not like that, but it'll be the kind of thing that's inspiring, and people will say, yes, this is a great use of my money. The Democratic Party is being successful in exactly what we expect them to do, to serve community. So,
Well, it's not just money. It's, like the Young Democrats have held phone banking.
right.
I mean, the money is only to get publicity, which maybe we can do some of the publicity and the and to get the volunteers out. What we lack in the really rural counties is manpower,
Right.
and I do hear from candidates, and I don't understand what is Future PAC and how does it relate to the Democratic Party? Because the candidates think it's us, and is it?
Right. Yeah, I think that's great. Part of the challenge, obviously, with a lot of communities is that we do lack volunteers, and we've learned through this pandemic that we can do a lot of remote work. Like you said, Young Democrats making phone calls, people reaching out to Georgia, for example, and all the work that was done there. Like I said, there are a lot of people who are active in the party and volunteering who maybe are in different counties but want to help, whether it's Lynn County, whether it's whether it's Union County or Gillum County. It's the idea that we need to facilitate that. We need to set those opportunities up and not just rely on individuals who have the gumption to put it together. This is the kind of thing that I think as a chair, I can't just make a program happen, right? I can't just do things unilaterally. But this is the kind of the idea behind proposing a special committee that really tries to come up with these recommendations. And as they do that, the ideas like the ones that you're talking about, the requests for how do you dedicate manpower and time and energy, and not just money, but all those things. And I think having a concerted effort to collect recommendations, create them, be innovative. We have to understand that process will take a little time, but I think that if we take the time to put those kinds of ideas together, we'll end up with a much stronger party with systems that remain in place that aren't just dependent upon whether or not somebody who has that innovation and has the time and the willpower is around, because eventually they won't be, and they'll get burned out. And we need to be able to plan for successorship. You plan for your success by planning for your successors, by empowering people, not by holding on to the power, but by sharing it. And I think that this is the same idea. It's like if we fixate on the places where we're most successful because we can hang our hat on it, we're not gonna do the full service to the communities where it's going to be hard. And we need to embrace that idea that we're Democrats. We need to go places where it's hard because we care about people who are affected by hardship. So let's go. I think that's the challenge that we should all give ourselves. Let's see. Michelle, were you next, and then Gary? Is that right?
Yeah.
I know Michelle's waving her hand.
Yeah, just try to make this quick. Having had the thrill of running for office a couple of times, and knowing that it's nice when people appreciate you and take you seriously. Your website is the most professional and thoughtful that I've seen. Now,
Michelle, before we go too far, I have to give a lot of credit to the awesome volunteers who helped me put that website together.
I know. Well, you can pass it on.
Okay.
You sound a lot like me 2 years ago, because I proposed the 36 counties, 17 caucuses, intersectionality of caucuses, send them out to the counties in the areas across the state. And the rural has always been a big issue, and to me, that's why when I knew I wasn't going to run for chair again of the Stonewall, I made a point of recruiting people from rural counties. And the result is the 5 elected, or the 5 officers of the Stonewall Caucus, none of them were from Multnomah. So, you know, you know, we get that. Now, you talked about something earlier at the leadership retreat a couple of weeks ago. I sat in with the Rural Caucus, and I asked them, because I have 6 counties I liaise to, and they are all rural counties. And the topic was basically being blue in a red county. But that's pretty much a rural counties. So I asked, which was a rational question, how could I help them? What could the liaisons do for them? And I got some very thoughtful things. One of the suggestions was they are often they don't have enough manpower. They don't have enough people. And they brought up the idea of maybe some of the bigger counties would be willing to help them. So I think that's a lot of what you're going for. So I'm going to ask you the other question first, but after that, you can respond to that question. The second question is, being a vice chair, I understand what it's like. How would you use your vice chairs?
Oh, that's a great question. Obviously, you know, Michelle and I have talked a little bit about the dynamics of what the chair obviously is most visible in front of the SEC, but the chair is also responsible for facilitating the admin committee. The vice chairs, the secretary, the treasurer, the DNC members. And so again, that's a facilitation role. And so one of the things, it's going to be important to help identify where are the different members of admin's skill sets, as well as their interests in terms of accomplishing certain tasks, both as the admin committee and as leadership. But there's also this component of saying, okay, what are all the tasks and the components that we need to be working on as officers of the party, and making sure that those various tasks don't get dropped just because we either lack a certain skill set among our group, or the fact that some people do, sometimes people do shy away from certain types of tasks because they're either tedious or frustrating or just not fun. And so finding a way to make sure that we share that load. I know that Michelle and I have talked about the idea of creating kind of almost like a job description or a task list where we prioritize our attentions as the different officers. But in terms specifically of vice chairs, I like the idea. I mean, I've been the chair of a board, but a president of a board before, and reelected for an environmental center nonprofit board. I like the idea of being able to step aside on occasion and letting a vice chair lead a discussion, in some setting or another. Really trying to empower our vice chairs to maybe be responsible for convening some group, or helping helping a special committee do its work. Again, it's going to depend on the dynamics and what people are excited or want to do. It's not like I can just dictate, oh, you're doing this. There's this element of delegation, but it's also a matter of cooperation and collaboration. And so again, once I'm chair, I want to work with everybody on the admin committee to make sure that we're tackling everything that needs to be tackled, that we're working together, that we see each other as a team, that, and like I was talking about, going to other counties, bringing along officers who want to or are available to go, bringing along caucus, not just leaders, not just the chairs and vice chairs, but members and people, trying to really find ways to empower people, not just the chairs, vice chairs, not just the officers of the party, but to find ways that, other people can get the credit for the work we do as a party. One of the things on that standing up for racial justice page about white supremacy culture in organizations is it's the idea that people will often give credit to the same person or the same position that typically receives credit, even if they're not really responsible for doing the successful work. You know, if you're a facilitator chair, probably not ultimately responsible for a lot of those successes. It's really somebody else. And so I want to make sure that those people get credit, and that you know, it's kind of like being a good team player. It's my fault if we lose. It's everybody else is the reason for us winning. And I think that that's the kind of approach I want to take, is that if we're struggling, it's on me. If we're doing well, it's everybody else. I'm just a team player. Yeah. Give me just a second, guys. I need my plug has detached from the wall and my computer's going. So give me 2 seconds. I'll be right back.
Nothing like campaigning by Zoom. Right, Sarah?
Actually, I think we're doing pretty good here.
Actually, this has been one of the better and more informative, and it's been very positive and a rational adult approach to things.
Yeah.
What-
You know, when Jenny was talking about that, you know, the PRC meetings,
Right.
it's like, good God, I wish I'd been on PRC when we had Zoom.
Oh,
It's hard to follow all of this stuff when you're distributed, and we just can't physically be in the same room, especially since, you know, we're coming up on another platform convention here.
yeah. And we skipped one.
It's
you know.
tough.
We skipped a platform convention, you know, which is probably convenient since we ran into the pandemic as well. But yeah, I do want to touch on with one thing that Eileen said about how we met. We met. I was chair of the drafting subcommittee for the economy article of the platform in 2018, and I'm hearing a little feedback. You guys hear me? Okay. Okay. But the challenging thing was that Eileen, of course, was over in Deschutes County. I was in Multnomah, and a lot of the people who were participating lived generally in this area, somewhere in Columbia County and Washington County and Clackamas, but several of them were from Multnomah. And so the people that we were trying to diffuse situations with weren't just on the phone. They were standing right in front of me in the same room at the Multnomah County offices. And, you know, I appreciate Eileen for being so collaborative in that work to help with that situation. I think it wasn't just me, it was the fact that people like Eileen and some other folks in that group were aware of the fact that, you know, things were getting tense, and were able to respond to the need to reorient ourselves and focus a little bit better. And it worked out well. I think we produced a pretty good article. Obviously, we always want to keep improving our platform, but I was really satisfied with the work we were able to produce and create after that. So thank you for bringing that up, Eileen, but Eileen was a great help there.
Well, thank you, John, because you're right. I mean, there were people sitting in right in front of you, and they were very vocal people. And it was hard to balance with those of us who are out on the phone in different areas. You did a great job with it. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks. I'm looking at the comments here. I see Joseph, I see you posted something about, have you sought the endorsement of Democratic Socialists of America, and/or would you be interested in such an endorsement? You know, I appreciate that thought. One of the things that I want to think about as chair is the idea that as an organization, do we want outside organizations to try to impact and influence the outcome of our elections internally? It's one thing to say, oh, this person is is an advocate for community and does great work within a certain organization, you know, for identification purposes only, but not as a representative. And for that person to maybe endorse a candidate or something like that. And I understand that. But I do think there's an important ethical question about whether or not, you know, we want the influence from another organization, even if it's another state party or the DNC, kind of structure. It's really a question about whether or not, we're making the decision, and whether or not we want to be influenced by other organizations. Again, I think that's maybe a little bit more of a personal choice. Right now, I'm not really inclined to try to say, look, this organization supports me or that organization supports me. I prefer not to go down that path if we can avoid it. I'm a union guy. I've worked in unions in education and the public sector, SEIU, AFGE, as well as National Education Association, things like that. But I'm not really inclined to go after, say, a union endorsement for a position within our party, just the same as they probably don't want us to endorse their candidates for office or positions either. So I do appreciate that question. I'd be willing to talk more about it at some other point, but I did want to address that. That's not the direction I want to go right now in terms of trying to find other organizations to support. But obviously, if people in DSA want to support me, I'd be happy for them to be supportive. Jenny, I saw your comment, loving the idea of a strategic plan. Who here has experience on nonprofit boards aside from party stuff? So I'm seeing Ruth, Jenny, Michelle, Eileen's probably, yeah, Gary, Sarah. Yeah, so we've got a lot of experience on the SEC from people who've worked in nonprofits, and obviously nonprofits can be big, they can be small, they can have all, they'd be really rigorously involved in, parliamentary procedure and the way they run meetings. They also can be more informal and community oriented, and a small group that's working on something very specific within their community. So at the same time, I think that we've got all that experience. We might as well use it. We might as well use it to make sure that we're the best nonprofit board for the state party of the Democrats in Oregon. And I think that we can do better in terms of bringing those kinds of skills together. Let's see. All right. Let's see. Gary, I see your hand is up. Did you have something else you wanted to add?
Yeah. Wanted to thank Jenny for bringing up the finances of local parties. And Jenny, I have really enjoyed working with you on PRC the last couple of years. My observation is that all of our county parties are probably struggling. Maybe there's an assumption that Multnomah County Dems have a lot of money. We struggle with that problem way more than you think. And that was like, it took up half of our executive committee meeting this last week. And what I'm hoping, maybe, John, is you're inviting questions about, what DPO can do, is maybe we can figure out a way to access all the money that seems to be locked up with candidates from the PACs. And it seems to be allocated toward supporting their elections and, frankly, re-elections, as it's mostly controlled by incumbents, and figure out how we use some of those funds to empower the local parties to do a lot more outreach to local Dems, to bring all the people to the table and see how they have an opportunity to participate in the democratic process. I think we would have a whole lot better answers to dealing with the timber unity issues and whatever if we had funds available to our local parties.
That's a great point. Obviously, Multnomah County has a lot of PCPs and maybe more volunteers than any other party, but at the same time, that also means that for all the things they want to do, there's limited funds, and I think we all want to do more than we have money for, especially within the party. And I think that if we're going to do the work to stand up to timber unity, to Republicans in the places where it's hard, we're going to have to figure out how we get money and support Some of it's keeping the lights on, right? Keeping the county offices open. I've talked to, smaller county parties that, they've had to shut down their office because they can't afford to keep it open. Similar things like that, providing that kind of space or the infrastructure to facilitate volunteer activities in those counties. Obviously, that takes some resources, but one of the challenges, obviously, as chair, I can't just snap my fingers and the budget changes. I can't snap my fingers and redirect money. And also, that's something that needs to be done in collaboration with staff. Obviously, you've got staff who are using the budget to do the work that they're paid to do. And so if we want to make adjustments to any of that, I think it needs to be done in a collaborative way that involves the board, the SEC, obviously our budget committee, kind of taking point on that, and working together collaboratively with staff about how do we set priorities in terms of those funds and how we share resources. Do we want to set up a specific fund that we're actually doing fundraising for to try to provide that kind of support? Is it something that we want to fundraise on and have a separate pot of money or something? All those things are good ideas. Again, as chair, I can't, I can propose all I want and I say, oh, this would be a great idea. But I think we have a treasurer, we have budget-oriented professionals, we have people who are accountants or, have better skills in those areas than say I do to come up with the exact answers. But I think that having that conversation about how do we provide not just volunteer support, but financial support for every county, because if we don't, we're going to lose that supermajority that those supermajorities in the House and the Senate. We're not going to be able to push back on the quorum situation in the Senate and try to take those extra seats. The pendulum swing is going to come eventually, and we need to, fight like hell to keep it swinging in our direction. We already lost a couple of seats and some other local seats in some key places to Timber Unity folks, and we need to take that. Obviously, we need to take that threat seriously and put our money where our mouth is in terms of supporting our rural communities. I see, let's see, who has not asked a question yet? I know that Sonny, you've posted things in the chat, and I see Travis, you're with us. Anybody else have a comment, question? I see a question there about Future PAC to Eileen. Eileen, do you want to take that question?
Yes, Future PAC and the Senate Democratic Leadership Fund are basically the same thing. One is for the House, that's Future PAC, and then the Senate Democratic Leadership Fund is for the Senate. Those are primarily, the biggest funders on that are actually the incumbent House members and Senate members, which is why they give so much of their money to themselves. To get themselves, it's to preserve majorities. I've worked with both of them. I found SDLF much easier to work with, but that could be, Future PAC had new managers this year, and that helps. But they tend to give most of their money and effort towards what's called a targeted race. So my first race was not targeted. I got a pat on the head and $750. And my second race was targeted. And as a result, I had to check in with them every week and this and that and the other thing. And they did. So they coordinated and helped with about half of my fundraising. So I raised $715,000. The rest of it, though, is me on the phone. It's not a fun part of the job, but it's part of the job. You got to do that. But they specifically are focused on those two. So they're sort of the state versions of the DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Candidate Committee, and the SCC, the Senate Candidate Committee. And they will take care, their first thing they're going to do is protect the seats that they already have. And then they're going to choose which ones they feel that they can actually make progress on. Almost always when they're going to replace someone. So, for example, Lori Monis Anderson and Arnie Roblin retired last year. So those two races were high priority for them. And next after that was Deb Patterson and me. It was an eye-opening experience to be able to work with both of those organizations in different, at different leverage points, shall we say. Future PAC didn't give me a lot of help in my first race. I got most of that help from SEIU and WinPAC, who believed in me anyway. And their support is what made this Senate District 27 one of the most competitive races. We only lost by 1,500 votes, and we had more votes cast in Senate District 27 than any other legislative race in this state.
Wow.
We came very close. And frankly, if we had held on to a few more groups in our quote progressive caucus that decided that I couldn't beat a white guy with that much power and that much fundraising, if they'd stayed on our side and fought with us, we would have flipped that seat. So this is why it's important to fight every single one of these races and never let anybody say, oh, I don't think they can win that race. Let's walk away from it. Because we can win the races that we work for.
Yeah. And even if we don't win that time, it sets us up to be successful the next time and the next time and the next time. You know, pushing back on that narrative is going to be important. The phrase I've kind of come upon is left for red. You know, if we leave districts to be red, they're going to be red, and that narrative is just going to keep taking hold. And people are going to leave those communities. There's going to be people are going to leave to go to Lane County and Eugene and Springfield. They're going to go to, the Portland and the metro area, or to a different state. You know, they're going to try to move out because they feel like there's not a community there that they can connect to.
Yeah.
Gary, I know I meant to touch on this also, the idea of like Future PAC, SDLF, and everything. Yeah, and you're right. Like, how do we get into the money that goes there? And obviously we can't tell those PACs to give us their money, and then because we're not in charge of it. They're separate entities, of course. But in terms of where that money comes from, like Eileen was saying, coming from the fundraising of the incumbents and the Democratic incumbents in the House and the Senate. What if we build better relationships with our legislators and with our other elected officials? Making sure that there isn't a mayor in Southern Oregon who tells me when I call her that I'm the first person even remotely connected to the DPO to ever contact her ever. And I'm not even elected. And this person's a mayor with a D next to her name. And so, there are people who've been successful in parts of the state, winning city council seats, county commission seats, mayors. There are also people who have run and lost. Eileen has learned a lot, right? People who've run for office learn a lot. And so the key, one of the things I hope to put together is, especially for rural communities and counties, to bring together people who have worked on those campaigns, either as candidates or as volunteers or even as staffers, try to bring them together in some fashion to generate recommendations, best practices, put those lessons together in some way. I even heard a great suggestion earlier this week from somebody who is out in Eastern Oregon, who is a chair or vice chair and ran for office, who said, it'd be really great if we had mentors, somebody who could help people who are trying to run, for office, especially for the first time, but even the second time, somebody who could kind of help them navigate those campaigns, especially in those local races where, we don't have giant amounts, don't have PACs putting money into those races, at least not on our end. Like we're talking about, like Jenny says in the comment there, we've got Timber Unity and other conservative entities putting money into those little races because they know that builds their bench. Again, we need to figure out how to tap those funds. We need to, build those relationships with legislators. We need to fundraise on this, and that may be hard to sell that kind of an idea of supporting rural communities, in the metro or in, Salem or Eugene, Springfield, or places like that. But I think we can frame that. We can say, you know what, we're going to have a Republican Secretary of State again. You know, we're not that far off from having a Republican governor. You know, and the more we leave, you know, those races uncontested or minimally contested, the more that's going to take root, the more that's going to happen, and the more of a challenge is going to be to push back against that momentum. You know, I think we can do that, but again, we have to be coordinated. We have to be organized. You know, we can focus all of our attention on 2022 because it always seems like the next election cycle is what we get all of our attention on. But we, like I said, strategic planning, 2, 4, 8 years, thinking about those cycles. We really can't afford not to plan ahead. And if we do, we're going to be prepared. You know, obviously, we can always say, "Ah, we should have done this years ago. We could have done this years ago. We could have had a plan." So, you know, sometimes people get stressed about it and say, "Yeah, but we could, if we'd done this years ago, we'd be fine. But now we've got to do it now. Urgency, urgency, crisis." And I think we can. You know, politics is always an urgent. There's always urgency. At the same time, we need to balance that urgency. Or some people are working on those urgent needs, but some people with the mind for strategic planning and organization and coordinating things can work together to actually, you know, focus on those, you know, intermediate and farther into the future plans that we need to have. Let's see the comments. Yeah. Neighborhood leader to reach non-affiliated voters, Jenny says. You know, definitely one of those things. We need to be strategic about how we connect with non-affiliated voters. Non-affiliated voters, as we know, are tend to sway a different way, and you know, certain in bluer districts versus say redder ones. So you know, the messaging has to be different. And again, if we're going to, you know, mobilize resources as well as volunteers from one place and help, you know, to help another, we need to make sure we do it in a way that understands the reality of the place we're trying to help. And understands that the messaging isn't always going to be the same. We can say things and then we can, you know, reframe it, but we definitely need to be cognizant of and let the local communities take leadership and be the ones who are helping them. Does anybody have any final questions before we work toward wrapping things up? I feel like we've had a really robust conversation, but is there anything that people feel like they've left unsaid or want to ask? Don't be shy. Well, if we don't have anything else to add, or if you don't think of anything at the moment, feel free to go onto the website. You can send suggestions and recommendations for things to include in the platform and in the proposals there. You can also reach me directly at john@johnharrisknight.com. You know, I'd be glad to see what you have to say. Obviously, I hope that those of you who are delegates will vote for me for chair. I think this is a vision that we can share together. It's certainly something that is not just of my own imagination. It's things that I've pulled together from all over the state. And there are a multitude of ideas. We just need to be able to prioritize which ones to do first and then second and then third and work together to do that. So again, I appreciate you all coming on. We're going to do another one tomorrow night. Feel free to join that one too if you have any other questions. But thank you very much for being here, and I'll let Lydia kind of take us out.
There's so much good material in this. Thank you so much for all your feedback. And like John said, the really robust discussion. We are going to be hosting one of these tomorrow at 6 p.m. And also we have we're working on scheduling for next week, but as you know, everything is going on right now. So we're waiting to hear back from everybody. Please pass the word along about this, town hall schedule we have going. Please ask people to check out johnharrisknight.com. And please feel free to email us at john@johnharrisknight.com or info@johnharrisknight.com if you want more information from the campaign. We'll be trying to schedule more calls and get more information out to you. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Buddy.
Night, everyone.
Have a great night.
Bye for
Good night.
now.